Hey everyone, welcome to another deep dive.
Mm.
Today we're looking at something kind of surprising, the connection between how we parent and the challenges facing today's workforce.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting link, and the source material for this one is an article titled "Gentle Parenting Led to Gentle Managing at Work" by Sylvia Ola.
Right. And just from that title alone, I
Yeah.
think we can guess where this is going. But, before we jump in, I want to remind everyone to follow and subscribe to the show so you don't miss any of our deep dives.
Definitely. So Sylvia Ola argues that the way a lot of kids today are being raised, this gentle parenting style, is actually having a direct impact on how they behave at work.
Yeah, and I think we've all seen it, those articles about how Gen Z is too sensitive or entitled or whatever.
Hmm.
And Ola's saying this isn't just a random thing, it's connected to how they were raised.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like growing up, maybe they weren't held accountable for their actions or they didn't really experience consequences. So now in the workplace, they have a hard time dealing with feedback or, handling difficult situations.
It's like they were shielded from all the tough stuff as kids, and now they're kind of unprepared for the real world.
Yeah, and that puts managers in a really tough spot because, traditional management styles just don't seem to work with this generation.
Right. Like, what do you do when an employee quits after 2 weeks? Because it's not for me. I mean, have you ever heard anything like that before?
It's definitely a new challenge, and Ola actually shares that exact anecdote in her article. And it's not just about quitting early, it's also things like not understanding why they need to learn certain skills or getting defensive when they receive constructive criticism.
So it's like this whole idea of what it means to be managed has kind of been flipped on its head.
Right, and Ola argues that the solution isn't to just become even more lenient with these employees.
So no more gentle managing.
No, she actually pushes back against that idea pretty strongly. Instead, she advocates for what she calls fair and consequential management.
So it's like finding that balance between being supportive, but also holding people accountable.
Exactly, like setting clear boundaries and expectations and having consequences when those boundaries are crossed.
Which I think is really important because, at the end of the day, the workplace is about getting things done and achieving goals.
Right. It's not just about everyone feeling good all the time. And Ola argues that this fair and consequential approach actually benefits both the employee and the employer.
Oh, so.
Well, for the employee, it helps them develop those essential skills like resilience, accountability, the ability to take feedback. Those are the things that help you succeed in any career.
And for the employer, it means having a team that's more productive and effective.
Exactly. It's about creating a win-win situation.
Okay, so fair and consequential management sounds great in theory, but how do we actually put it into practice?
Well, Ola provides some really concrete strategies in her article. We can definitely dive into those in a bit. But before we do that, I want to point out that she also acknowledges that not every Gen Z employee fits this mold.
Right, it's not like every single person from this generation is overly sensitive or whatever.
Yeah. Exactly. She actually highlights some of the positive contributions that Gen Z is making to the workplace.
Like what?
Well, for one, they're pushing for things like salary transparency in job ads, which is something that benefits everyone, not just Gen Z.
Yeah, that's a great point. And they're also known for being super tech savvy and adaptable, which are obviously huge assets in today's world.
Right. And they often bring a real passion for social justice and creating a more equitable and inclusive workplace.
So it's like they're challenging the status quo in a lot of positive ways.
Exactly. And I think it's important to acknowledge that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we've got this kind of complex picture emerging, right? We've got Gen Z employees who might require a different management approach, but who also bring a lot of great qualities to the table.
Right. And Ola's insights give us a framework for navigating all of that.
And I think it's really interesting that she has a second article titled, "There is no high-performing organization with snowflakes," because it kind of builds on these ideas and takes a closer look at this whole snowflake mentality.
Yeah, that term can be a bit loaded, so I think it's worth unpacking what she actually means by it.
Yeah, for sure. So what is she getting at with this snowflake mentality? How does she see it playing out in the workplace?
Well, she describes it as this combination of traits that can be really detrimental to both the individual and the organization.
Like what kind of traits are we talking about?
Things like, an inflated sense of uniqueness, a sense of entitlement, being overly emotional or easily offended.
Okay, so it's not just about being sensitive. It's more about this perceived fragility and an inability to handle challenges or criticism.
Exactly. And she sees a direct link between this mentality and how some kids are being raised. Like, if you're constantly shielded from discomfort and never have to face consequences, it can make it harder to cope with the real world later on.
Which the workplace is definitely a part of.
For sure. And Ola argues that this can manifest in the workplace as, a reluctance to take ownership of mistakes or a tendency to blame others or an inability to handle constructive feedback.
Which definitely don't make for a high-performing team.
Nope. And that's where her argument for fair and consequential management comes in even stronger, because she believes that by setting clear boundaries, providing honest feedback, and fostering accountability, we can actually help people develop the resilience and coping skills they need to thrive.
So it's not about being harsh or uncaring. It's about equipping people with the tools they need to succeed.
Exactly. And this is where her second article really digs into the organizational consequences of catering to this snowflake mentality.
So what did she say about that? What happens when companies try to appease overly sensitive individuals?
She makes a pretty bold claim. She argues that it can actually lead to the downfall of organizations.
Wow, that's a strong statement. Why does she believe that?
Well, she argues that when companies prioritize avoiding conflict or upsetting anyone over, establishing clear performance standards and holding people accountable, it creates a culture of mediocrity.
So it's like they're lowering the bar to avoid hurting anyone's feelings. And in the end, it hurts everyone.
Exactly. And she believes this can ultimately affect their customers, their clients, even their reputation.
So what's the alternative? What kind of organizational culture should companies be striving for?
She advocates for a culture that balances support and challenge empathy and accountability. It's not about being cold-hearted, but it is about creating an environment where individuals feel valued and respected, but also empowered to grow and learn. And that requires clear expectations, honest feedback, a willingness to push people outside their comfort zones.
And she's pretty clear that this shift needs to start at the top right. Leaders need to set the tone and model the behavior they want to see in their teams.
Absolutely. Leaders need to be willing to have tough conversations, hold people accountable, and create a culture where it's safe to make mistakes, but also where there's a clear understanding of what's expected and what happens when those expectations aren't met.
It sounds like a lot of this boils down to communication, right? Being really clear about expectations, providing regular feedback, and creating a culture of open and honest dialogue.
Exactly. And that's something we can all work on regardless of our generation or our role within an organization.
This has been a lot to take in. I feel like we've barely scratched the surface of all the insights Ola offers in these two articles. But I'm curious, what stands out to you most from what we've discussed so far?
I think what strikes me most is Ola's emphasis on the interconnectedness of our lives. The way we raise our children, the values we instill, the skills we prioritize, these all have ripple effects that extend far beyond the family unit and impact the workplace, our communities, even society as a whole.
That's a really powerful point. It reminds us that everything is connected. But before we get too philosophical, let's dive back into the specifics of Ola's argument. We've talked a lot about the challenges, but what about the solutions? What practical steps can managers and leaders take to implement this fair and consequential management style?
Well, thankfully, Ola gives us some really concrete advice. It's not just about pointing out the problem. She actually offers some ways to fix it.
Okay, so let's get into it. Where does she suggest we start?
Communication is a big one. And that starts from day one, being crystal clear about expectations, roles, responsibilities, performance standards, everything.
No more beating around the bush or assuming everyone just knows what they're supposed to be doing.
Exactly. Ola believes that transparency right from the beginning sets everyone up for success. Employees know exactly what's expected, what success looks like, how their work fits into the bigger picture.
Makes sense. And I'm guessing this transparency carries over to feedback as well.
Absolutely. She's all about direct and honest feedback, even if it's a little uncomfortable. She says that shielding employees from constructive criticism actually does more harm than good.
It's like coddling them might seem nice at first, but it doesn't prepare them for the real world.
Right, and this all ties into her focus on fostering accountability.
So it's about finding that sweet spot between support and honesty and making sure people own their work and their actions.
Exactly, and that can be really empowering, even if it's a little uncomfortable at times.
But how do you actually cultivate that sense of accountability? It's one thing to say it's important, but how do you make it happen?
Well, Ola talks about giving employees opportunities to take on challenges, make decisions, and really see the impact of their contributions.
So they're not just following orders, they're actually making choices and experiencing the results of those choices.
Right. It's about creating an environment where people feel empowered to try things out and then learn from both the successes and the mistakes.
Almost like controlled consequences instead of shielding them completely.
Exactly. And that leads us to another key point, developing resilience. Because let's face it, setbacks and challenges are a part of life, especially in the workplace.
So it's not about preventing those challenges, but
Mhm.
about giving people the tools to bounce back.
Right. And Ola has some great tips for fostering resilience, like encouraging a growth mindset, that idea that you can always learn and improve.
So instead of getting defeated by a setback, you see it as a chance to get better.
Exactly. And she also emphasizes the importance of focusing on solutions, not problems, and seeking support when you need it.
It's about creating a culture where it's okay to make mistakes and ask for help.
Exactly. Which I think is something a lot of workplaces could benefit from. And that brings us to another point that I think often gets overlooked, the importance of strong social skills.
Oh, absolutely. I've seen firsthand how a lack of social skills can really throw a wrench in things.
It impacts communication, teamwork, conflict resolution, everything.
Yeah.
And Ola suggests that this is an area where some Gen Z employees might need some extra guidance.
Maybe because they grew up spending more time online than interacting face to face.
It's possible.
Yeah.
But the good news is these skills can be learned and practiced. It's just about recognizing that some folks might need a little extra support in that area.
So it's not enough to just hire for technical skills anymore.
Hmm.
We need people who can communicate and collaborate effectively.
Exactly. And that ties back into fair and consequential management too, because part of that is about setting clear expectations for how people interact with each other and providing feedback when those expectations aren't met.
It's interesting because on the surface, fair and consequential management might sound kind of strict, but when you really break it down, it's about creating a supportive environment where people can develop and grow.
I think that's a great way to put it. It's about recognizing that sometimes the kindest thing you can do is to challenge someone to hold them accountable and to give them the tools they need to navigate the real world.
So we've talked about communication, accountability, resilience, and social skills. It seems like Ola is advocating for a really holistic approach to management.
You're right. It's not just about what people do, but also how they think and how they interact with each other.
This is giving me a lot to think about. What are your thoughts on this connection between parenting and the workplace? Is this something you've seen in your own experience?
It's a fascinating connection, and I have observed some of those trends, but it's important to remember that we can't generalize about an entire generation. Every individual is different, and their upbringing is just one piece of the puzzle.
That's so true. We can't just assume things about people based on their age.
Exactly, which is why Ola emphasizes the importance of communication and individualized feedback. It's about treating everyone as an individual and tailoring your approach to their specific needs.
This whole discussion about snowflake mentality and organizational culture has been pretty intense.
It's definitely thought-provoking.
It makes you think about what kind of work environment you want to be a part of.
Absolutely. It raises some big questions about how we balance compassion and accountability, how we create a culture where people can thrive.
And it challenges us to examine our own biases about different generations.
It's a good reminder that effective leadership requires a deep understanding of people and a willingness to adapt.
And to be fair to Ola, she does acknowledge that not everyone fits the snowflake stereotype.
Mm.
She knows there are plenty of hardworking and resilient people in every generation.
Right. Her point is just that we need to be aware of these trends and their potential impact.
And she's not advocating for some kind of authoritarian management style. It's about finding that balance between support and challenge, empathy and accountability.
Exactly. Creating a workplace where people feel valued, respected, and empowered.
Sounds like there's a lot to unpack here.
It really does feel like we're seeing the workplace in a whole new light, especially when you consider how parenting styles might be playing into these generational differences.
Yeah, and we've talked about the downsides, this need for resilience, the challenges of giving feedback. But I'm curious, is there anything about how this generation was raised that could actually be a good thing for the future of work? Is there a flip side to all of this?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's easy to focus on the challenges, but there are definitely some potential upsides. And to be fair to Ola, she does acknowledge that Gen Z brings a lot of strengths and valuable perspectives to the table.
Like what, for example? I'm ready for some good news.
Well, think about it. This generation grew up completely immersed in technology. They're digital natives in a way that no other generation has been before. I mean, they never even knew a world without the internet or smartphones.
It's true. They were practically born with a mouse in one hand and a smartphone in the other.
Exactly. And that means they're coming into the workforce already equipped with a lot of those in-demand tech skills. They're comfortable with new platforms, they learn quickly, and they can adapt to new technologies really easily.
So in a way, their upbringing actually prepared them for a work world that's becoming more and more digital and fast-paced.
Exactly. And that digital fluency is a huge asset for companies that are trying to stay ahead of the curve.
And it's not just about technical skills either. I've heard people say that Gen Z is actually more collaborative and open to feedback than previous generations, which seems a bit counterintuitive considering all this talk about them being sensitive.
It is interesting, but I think it speaks to the emphasis on communication and emotional intelligence that was often a part of gentle parenting. You
Oh.
know, this generation is used to talking about their feelings. They value open and honest dialogue, and they're comfortable working in teams.
So they might be sensitive to feedback, but they're also more likely to be receptive to it if it's given in a respectful and constructive way. Which brings us back to Ola's point about communication and building trust.
Exactly. And that openness combined with their collaborative nature can be really powerful for innovation and creating a more positive work environment.
And let's not forget about their passion for social justice.
Mhm.
This is a generation that really cares about things like equality and sustainability, and they're not afraid to speak up about it, which can be a real force for positive change in the corporate world.
Absolutely. They're holding companies accountable and pushing for a workplace that aligns with their values.
It's like they're bringing a sense of purpose to their work. They want to make a difference in the world, not just in their careers.
And that sense of purpose can be incredibly motivating and inspiring for everyone.
So it sounds like Gen Z brings a lot of good stuff to the table, along with some of those challenges that Ola highlights. The balancing act, for sure.
It is. But I think that's what makes leadership so interesting. It's about adapting to the changing needs of the workforce, recognizing the unique strengths of each generation, and creating an environment where everyone can thrive.
This deep dive has really given me a lot to think about. It's changed how I see generational differences in the workplace.
Me too. Ola's work is a real wake-up call for all of us. We need to be actively involved in shaping the future of work and creating a more equitable and fulfilling world for everyone.
I couldn't agree more. Well, it looks like we're just about out of time. Thank you so much for joining me for this deep dive into Ola's work. It's always a pleasure to have these conversations.
The pleasure was all mine. It's always great to explore these topics with you.
And to all our listeners out there, we hope this deep dive has given you some food for thought. If Ola's analysis is correct, and there really is a link between parenting styles and workplace dynamics, what does that mean for the future of work? Will companies need to rethink how they approach management and employee development? And how can we all, regardless of our generation, cultivate that resilience and accountability we need to thrive in this ever-changing world? These are big questions, and there aren't any easy answers. But Ola's work gives us a starting point for these important conversations. So keep exploring these ideas, challenge your own assumptions, and let's keep talking about how we can create a better future of work for everyone. And as always, thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive. We'll be back next week with another deep dive into a topic that's on your mind. Make sure to follow and subscribe so you don't miss out. Until next time, keep diving deep.